So, welcome to another episode of Crap No One Tells You. With me today for the second time is Seth Lejeune from Remax. And we are going to be talking about some of the crap no one tells you about buying real estate. So, welcome.
Thank you.
Let's dive right in.
Dive right in.
What's the crap no one tells you about buying real estate?
Well, you know, the world I inhabit is one of bad information, incomplete information, outdated information. So real estate itself is actually kind of an antiquated process and system of doing a transaction. Like, I don't think realtors are going to be phased out by, Chat GPT or anything like that, at least not yet. But there is a lot of bad information from the 80s, 90s, 2000s that are don't really apply today.
Okay.
So, I mean, one, if you just want me to start with a huge one that I get all the time is this 20% down more, to buy a house.
Oh, that one's my favorite.
Yeah, and that is one that comes from mom and dad, and it used to be a requirement of lenders when interest rates were, 15, 16, 18%.
Aren't we heading there?
No, we might. I don't think the system will allow that, but yes, your point's well taken. No, and it's a big, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, right? Like you're just talking to somebody and they're like, well, I can't buy a house. And I'm thinking, okay, well, you don't make enough money, or you don't have any money saved up, or whatever. It's like, well, I don't have 20% to put down. I'm like,
you don't.
What do we, like, you don't need that anymore.
Right.
So that's a big one for me. And now, to be fair, there are a lot of people who do understand this, but really, 20 years ago, they got rid of all this where, you didn't have to have it down. You can put down 3%, you can put down 5%, 10%, 15.
So let's back up.
Okay.
Let's start with a basic process of deciding to buy a house and taking the first steps, because financing is really almost one of the first steps you have to secure, right?
It's the second step.
Second step.
Yeah.
So walk me through it.
Okay. First step is, and not just because I'm a realtor, I'm saying you really should call your realtor.
Right.
Because your realtor is going to put you in touch with the right people from the start.
And on the buyer side, there's no downside to you using a realtor.
No, because technically, well, there's some dispute about who actually pays who and whose commissions, but we'll save that for another time. Okay. But no, yes, effectively, I'm not requiring a commission be paid out of the buyer's pocket. So they should use me to guide them from the get. The most successful buyers that I work with are the ones who do this and they follow a process. What you will find is a lot of buyers will go and find an agent at an open house, or they'll call Loan Depot or some lender. But how I always present it to my people is you want to kind of come into like my ecosystem. Okay, I got everyone you need. I got your title, I got your lender, I got your inspector. Keep in mind, in the state of Pennsylvania, you are allowed to use whoever you'd like.
Correct.
You can't like steer people towards certain people, but generally how I explain it is I work well with these people. You don't know what you're doing, and I can bring you in and basically get you make this like as an actually enjoyable experience by working with the right people.
So step one is find a realtor you like.
Find a realtor you like. That realtor should have resources for the rest of the transaction. Okay. The next step would be to speak to a lender. Okay. And then, realtors get hung up here because they think, because they suggest that they talk to a lender to get, pre-approved. Some realtors get into trouble because the buyer thinks, well, they don't want to waste their time with me. They want to make sure I can qualify before they show me any houses or whatever. That is true, but for me, it's not a waste of time. I actually don't want to waste the buyer's time looking at houses that they can't afford or not understanding the numbers. And we bring a very like kind of educational, holistic approach to this business where it's like, I want you to have all the information.
Right. Like people don't know generally, because we had a mortgage guy on very early on when we started, where it's became abundantly clear that not all lenders are the same either.
No,
like
absolutely
there's a
not.
huge difference between going with someone local or going with a Bank of America or whatever it is. So like you guys will help them steer not just to a lender, but to the right lender.
To the right lender. I kind of joke, it's not a rule, but I kind of have a joke with my team that if your name's on the side of a building or you have advertising, we can't use that bank. So that's like no bank branches, like no offense to like a police and fire credit union, but generally those people, yes, they can do a mortgage.
But a credit union is not a bank.
It's not a mortgage servicing company. Like I want somebody who lives and breathes this stuff because they're going to be up to date on the latest trends. They can explain and properly utilize loan programs and all that. I could write a commercial lease, but I don't think you want me doing it. I mean, there's probably going to be mistakes. You're going to call me in 5 years, and there's going to be a blaring hole in it. So I stay in my lane, and I think that mortgage brokers are best suited in this environment to handle transactions.
Okay, so that covers step 1 and step 2. Find the realtor, get your financing in order.
Yep.
Then what?
Well, at the same time we're talking to the lender, we're also really narrowing down your criteria.
Okay.
But criteria, speaks to what the lender will lend. So we kind of do those two things at the same time.
I want 6,000 square feet with a
for $175,000.
Yeah, for $175,000. Yeah.
Sure. Rural Indiana is where you need to go.
Okay.
No, but at the end of the day, we want to do. I have my onboarding call. I explain my process, and then I say, okay, we're going to talk to the lender. And literally we'll get on with our lender, and then I will stay on the call. And I always say, like, let's stay on the call, talk about the fun stuff. Let's talk about the house. Let's talk about what you want to, when you want to move, where you want to move, what the house looks like. But we can then go out and search, knowing we have all the information we need.
Got it.
So
now you're searching. Then I'm assuming the next step is go look.
This next step is to set up a portal and a search, and yes, then we go look.
Okay, so now I found the house. It was this 17-bedroom mansion for $175 in rural Indiana. Now what takes over?
Then we go to more of the transactional side. We write up an offer. If there's a bidding war, we go into that process.
And there's been a lot of that over the last few years.
Yes. In fact, my team and I, we have a 17-point bidding war strategy sheet that like all these like levers that we can pull on.
Okay.
We take a very, we call the agent, make them our best friends. Our lenders call the agent, make them our best friends, that kind of thing. Write buyer letters, all this good stuff. So, but we get the property. If we do get the property, then we go under contract.
Okay.
Then you have to remit deposit. The buyer, in the state of Pennsylvania, for a contract to be enforced, there has to be what's called consideration. It's just a fancy way of there has to be money exchanged.
Right.
So the buyer remits deposit. If there's inspections, we do that. Depending on the property, we'll decide on which inspections we want. Generally, in a house without well and without a septic system, it's just going to be a home inspection, which is just kind of everything.
Yep.
And then termite, which is a wood-destroying insect, and radon.
Yep. Yeah, we actually had a home inspector on during a previous episode.
There you go.
So that talked about the process of home inspections.
Yes, and I will
which
say
was
this,
surprising.
I think I know what inspector you're talking about. I will say, I want my inspector to be extremely nerdy. Yes. I want him to be a stickler. I want him to be very detail oriented. Something that I am not.
Right.
Because I'm more of like the pretty face and like, hey, let's go see some houses. I'm very knowledgeable about homes, but in terms of like checking every single box, that's what you want your inspector to have.
Right.
That mindset.
And it's the inspection process is really just you understanding what you're buying, right? Like the inspector's goal is not to go and tear the house apart.
Yeah.
It's just to help you understand this is what you are actually bidding on. Mm-hmm. This is what you will be buying. Right?
Yes.
So let's talk about that for a little bit, because you always hear that, it fell apart after the home inspection. The deal didn't go through after the home inspection. So people often have this tendency of thinking that home inspections are what destroys deals, but it's really not, right? The home inspection is just giving you an idea and the seller what they're truly selling and what you are buying, with an opportunity to possibly renegotiate if things aren't what you thought when you first put in your bid, right? That's kind of...
Yeah, and we get almost all of them through. But there are times when you inspect a house and it's just one thing after another. There's There's mold in the attic. The gutters aren't tied in correctly. There's moisture damage downstairs. There's termite, that type of stuff. So sometimes it gets to a point where it's like, well, whoa. I didn't know what I was signing up for. I'm out.
Okay.
But most inspections are used for, actually a lot of my buyers, they use them for like, hey, this is, I know coming down the pike. And they're kind of in that mindset of like, hey, this is what this is like more of a list for my home maintenance in the next 5 years. Got it.
So once that's done, offers approved, then it's just settlement and you're done, right?
Well, you also have to order title.
Okay.
Okay. So if anybody doesn't know what title is essentially a company that goes in and makes sure that the house you're buying or that the sellers who are selling it have the right to sell it, and that when you settle on the house, that you have absolute ownership of that property. So any liens or back taxes or anything all have to be cleared before you settle. So you have kind of like a clean slate.
Got it.
All lenders will require that is. The title insurance is gotten. Once you order title, then there's the appraisal. The lender has to appraise the property to ensure that
that happens last in the process.
That happens. It all kind of happens at the same time. Okay. Usually inspection will occur and then title will get started, but the appraisal almost always happens after the inspection.
Okay.
Because the inspection or the appraisal is about $400 to $600 depending on the property.
Got it.
So there's no sense in appraising if it's going to fall through to inspection. So you kind of take that one bite at a time.
Got it.
So then the appraisal comes out, and that's generally something that the seller's agent handles if they so choose. But the lender basically has to come in and make sure that the property is worth what everyone says it is.
And if it is, we're good to go.
And if you're
closing,
yep.
You sign paperwork for 2 hours, and then you get handed your keys.
That's about it, yeah.
Okay.
So in a nutshell.
So let's go back.
Okay.
What is the lowest amount you've ever heard of someone putting down on a house to get in?
Well, you can do 100% down or 100% loan, 0% down, but you still got to pay closing costs and that
Correct.
Kind of stuff.
So there's stuff you still got to pay, but this whole 20% down really is as little as 0% down under the right circumstances.
Under the right circumstances in the right areas, there are loan programs that will allow you to put no money down. You just pay your closing costs. Now you step up one, you can go into like an FHA program, which is a government-backed program. It's 3.5%.
There's a first-time home buyer too, right? Or is that the FHA? Or
no, FHA is just a certain loan program with conditions based on a buyer's qualifications. So like if the credit's a little banged up,
a little
shaky. But listen, an FHA loan serves a purpose because it allows otherwise people who they're going to pay their mortgage. They're just their credit just hasn't reach the level into the 700s. It offers a way for home ownership for those people.
Got it.
And generally, like a 650 credit score does not mean you're a deadbeat. It means that you either
need some work,
or you have you don't have a lot of credit at all. That's the other thing. That's the other misconception about credit is like, hey, just because I don't have no debt isn't necessarily a good thing because credit bureaus want to see that you can actually be a big boy or a big girl and pay your debts.
Got it.
And then you can go up to 5%, and then that's when conventional loan programs start, and then you can go all the way up to
20, 30, 50.
20, 30 to 50.
Whatever.
But that is a big one. People are like, oh, no, how in the world are we going to save 20%? We're never going to be homeowners. And they get that in their mind. It's like, no. It's like,
so here's the thing that kind of blew my mind, because once you start talking to people, and there are people that are huge advocates for buy a house, get in, right? Which I'm 100%. I used to not be a proponent on that.
Because you're a contrarian. That's okay.
I am, kind of. But at some point I realized that, and I talked my brother-in-law into buying a house. Like they had been struggling. We figured out a way for them to literally move in with, I think it was like nothing down, because we had equity in the house that we gifted to them.
Okay.
So that was considered their down payment was the equity, right? But anyways, one of the things that I realized relatively early on is once you buy the first one, it is way easier to buy the second, right? Or move from that to the next one. So this whole people like, oh, I can't afford my dream house. I can't afford what I really want. Like, get started, get in somewhere, right? Like, because the moment you're in, you start building equity.
Yep.
The home will probably increase in value. So yes, it may not be your dream home or what you really wanted to stay in, but within 3 to 5 years, that could have built the difference between where you are and what you want.
Yeah.
Right?
You have any idea how many upsizers I'm dealing with right now who are going to walk with 70, 80 grand?
Bought something smaller,
and now they've waited 5-6 years, and obviously we've gone through an extreme event in the last 2-3 years with equity growth, but almost nobody regrets buying a house in the end, unless it's like a total lemon. But we're going to inspect it and make sure it's not. Correct. You know what I mean? or they got in and they shouldn't have been in there in the first place. They didn't have the income to support a roof or a, HVAC repair or something like that. But I don't put people in houses like that. I will sideline my buyers, be like, guys, like, let's wait a year and let's get your kitty, because I want to put people into homes safely.
Right. Are there agents out there that will literally try to find that will try to find people like the absolute maximum they can afford right now, that pushes all the limits? Or is it generally the buyer that's pushing those limits?
I'd say it's an outlier. I mean, most people, the limit that you're talking about, really, I always tell my buyers to focus on the payment. The number doesn't mean anything, because you have to consider the taxes and everything in the monthly payment. But the monthly payment's relentless. It's like the tide. It comes every month for 30 years. And I always tell my people, it's like, I don't want your heart to sink when you open up that mailbox and that thing's sitting there. And it's not supposed to be like completely comfortable either. I mean, it is a mortgage payment, but I don't want it to be something where it's like you got to like move money around and it's
every month to try to make the payment.
It's a source of stress for you. Correct. I say, because then other parts of your life are going to fall apart. But I don't see that much from a realtor perspective. Buyers are smarter than you think. Like buyers are more cautious than they've been in the past. Millennials are more cautious about their money. So
you're kind of saying that the average home buyer has changed over the years.
Yes. Yeah. And if you pull a sales book out from the 70s or 80s, you pull some like Tom Hopkins book out or some Zig Ziglar book, like that stuff doesn't work anymore. I mean, because I always remind people that like millennials and Zers, like, they were sitting at the top of the stairwell, like listening to their parents fight about money and argue about money during the Great Recession. Like they're much more cognizant of how things can go wrong. I think a lot of people dump on those two generations, but
people tend to forget that 2008 was 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so anybody that was 15 at the time is now 30. Like they're a home buyer. They saw it.
Yeah. And they also have parents who went through it and said, you're not going to make the same mistake I made. Mm-hmm. You do have that thing. Oh yeah, we bought a house with like $4 and interest rates were 18%. Get in there and buy a house. You have those parents, but most of those parents are also, a lot of parents are very cautious about their kids, and they've actually put good money values within the millennial and the Gen Zer generation.
There's a lot of people that learned a hard lesson during the 2007 to 2009 years.
That's absolutely right. And it was one of the reasons I got into this business, because I saw so many of my friends. I used to play a lot of poker, and I was luckily just young enough that I bought my first house in 2010. I was just young enough where I didn't buy, but I was being told by one of our friends who was a mortgage broker in 2006. He's like, you got to buy. And I went to my father, who's in real estate. He was a developer. And I said, oh, we're thinking about buying a house. He's like, the hell you are. There's no way you're buying a house right now. And I wish he was here today to tell me exactly what he saw that no one else saw. But there is a lot of caution with buyers. The other thing that a lot of people are dealing with right now is the cost of childcare with daycare.
Right. Everything's going up. I mean, the cost of everything. Let's be realistic, right? Yeah. Like, go buy a dozen eggs.
Yeah.
Like, you have to trade your left front tire for a dozen eggs right now. Yeah. Like,
yeah. And it's really a shame, because I mean, most of the world thinks we're nuts the way we live. It's like grandma's here, the parents are here, and the kids are here, and we all live estranged. But like, we've never biologically, we weren't supposed to live like that. And now we've all kind of taken this individualized American thing and to the hilt, where it's like traditionally the grandparents were the non-working adults that would watch the kids to cover. And like there was no daycare in the Indian tribe.
Correct. And it's funny because like I just came back from Colombia.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite places there is this I guess you can call it a town. There's like, I don't know, 25,000 people that live there. But it's very interesting because you see a lot more of that. Like in the mornings, you see 3 generations walk out of a house.
Yeah.
Right? Like the grandparents are taking the kids to school and the parent is going off to work. And I was like, interesting.
No daycare.
Yeah, no daycare,
Yeah.
right? Like there's someone there as a caretaker. And you saw that throughout the day. Like it was always elderly people with younger kids.
Yep.
The parents were out working but there was a lot of these joint households.
Well, and not to leave the topic of this podcast, but that is also how the values and traditions of a society were passed on. The grandparents were constantly in touch with the parents constantly in touch with the kids, the grandkids. They were passing on the values, the stories of their families, all that kind of lineage type stuff. Now the kids get it from social media and outside, and that makes them more anxiety prone, depression prone, and that kind of thing, because it's like, they're not getting the warm and squishy goodness from the family. It's really this exterior thing trying to sell them something.
Right. So just to bring it back to being a home buyer, because one of the things we had to look at, and this ties right into what we're talking about, was my wife always said, if one of my parents passes away, especially if my father passes away before my mom is moving in with us.
Sure.
Like it wasn't even up for debate, no conversation. That was just a condition that I knew came with her. So when we bought a house, her parents are now in their 70s. They were late 60s when we bought the house. One of the things we had to take into consideration was, well, do we have enough space in this house if that happens?
Yep.
Like, do we have space we could modify so that she could be there? What are some of the things that you ask a buyer? Like, are there things coming down the pike that you think would affect your decision today?
Sure. So I asked the question, who's all coming with us?
Right.
Like, who's all coming into the house? Generally, this has already been thought out, believe it or not, by a lot of people before they even decided to call a realtor. This 3-generation consolidation, 2 houses into one type deal, is a lot more common.
And it's funny, just to kind of culturally, you see a difference, right? Like my brother-in-law's ex-wife is from Mexico. They have 2 generations living in a house.
Yeah.
They never even considered getting 2 houses. They got a house with 2 floors.
Yeah.
Half the family lives upstairs, half the family lives downstairs.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, but it really is a thing. And if it's also just to offset, they're thinking, hey, listen, if for 5 years they can't take care of a house on their own, but for 5 years they can live with us instead of having to put all their retirement into a retirement home. Plus, it's just not a really great environment. They don't feel right like putting their parents into some retirement home. So it definitely, the generational dynamics is a huge thing. The other side of it is that the grandparents sell their house and they live in just to take care of the kids, like when they're really young.
Right.
And that there obviously, as you know, has to be a harmonious relationship between the in-laws and the
So I go by the theory that pretty much stopped for the last 20 years. Like back in the 90s, people started doing this. Everybody has to have their own house. Everybody lives apart, blah, 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 blah. Are you seeing that change now? Are people getting back to them? Maybe I should ask my parents to move in with me. Maybe I should have grandmom come live with us.
Yeah, and this isn't because, they read a book about how great our biological roots were. It was because I can't afford $2,700 a month in daycare.
So it's cheaper to have grandma move in.
Well, it is, and it's cheaper for grandma.
Yeah.
If the cost of eggs are going up and grandma's got to buy her eggs, and then, you got your eggs and you got almost $3,000 going out the door every month, financially, it doesn't make any sense. And that's why a lot of times you'll see poorer people with less access to capital will live together as 3. Right. So some of that is happening to, white collar workers, where it's like, hey, listen, I need to be able to go to work and not have to run home at 4:00 to get the kids off the bus. I need the flexibility with my work. Mom's just sitting there watching, Murder, She Wrote or whatever. Why not just kind of bring this all in? But it's also better for people. It's better for the grandparents to have that kind of social connection all the time. So But yes, absolutely, we're seeing more consolidation. But it's logistical, it's familial, but it's also economic.
Okay. So what are some other things that home buyers? So we know they've become more educated over the last few years, right?
Yes, they're more savvy.
What are some other things that let's get back to some of the myths,
Okay.
right? Some of the misconceptions people have.
Okay. That applying for a mortgage damages your credit. It's a big one. It's a huge one, man. It's a struggle every day because you'll sit there and be like, I'm not ready to apply. I don't want my credit. And people come from two camps. They're either so proud of their high credit score that there's under no circumstances will they do anything to hurt it, or they work really hard to get it to a point where it's like in that range of strong home buyership, and they don't want to like shoot themselves in the foot. Or they've had like a bad experience with credit, with somebody lying about, like a car salesman lying to them about like, oh, this isn't going to hurt your credit.
And then they bump it three times.
They run it, yeah,
right.
And then they would keep running it and running it.
Yeah.
That's a big one for the real estate industry, but you can't get pre-approved until they run your credit. Okay. And again, like I talked about it earlier in the episode, it's like you're in that balance where like you're saying, Gummy, you got to get approved. And sometimes the buyer will think, he doesn't think that I'm telling the truth about my finances and my credit score. And he doesn't trust me, and he doesn't want to waste his time with me. And
it really has nothing
to do with that. It really just has to do with the fact, like, I don't want to show you a $350,000 house if all you can do is afford $300,000, because then everyone's going to be really upset. And it's really the proper way to do it. Everyone's busy. Mm-hmm. Nobody, I don't want to go out and waste a buyer's time when all they have to do is apply for a mortgage. Now, applying for a mortgage is more than just having your credit pulled. You have to produce documents and everything like that. But that's a big one for us, is people worrying about credit and the amount of misconceptions surrounding credit. And I think it's intentional. I really do. I think it's like a black box.
Okay. They don't want people to know.
Well, and I think there's also this thing where I think they kind of make it up as they go.
Do you know what? Honestly, I got to a point because I had to start building. I didn't move here till I was in my 20s.
Okay.
Right. So I had to still start building credit as a 28-year-old, like no pre-existing history. So everybody looks at your date of birth.
Yeah.
And your first credit card. Well, why did you get your first credit card at 29? Because I wasn't here. Yeah. Like I didn't live here at the time, and it was weird because like I would do nothing and my credit would go up. I would do something else that I thought would make it go up, and it would go down.
And that's right.
And you're like, what? Like,
yeah.
Are you just making this up on the fly?
Yeah.
Like, is it just a random number? Is there someone with a dartboard that goes, up or down?
Pull that lever.
Right.
It's like, ding 'em, Harry, ding 'em.
Yeah. So what are some other things? So finances are definitely a big thing. What about the whole, you should buy a fixer-upper?
Yeah, so fixer-uppers are, they make for great TV, don't they? Jesus. I tamp out more bullshit from HGTV. Listen, HGTV has actually, I think, been good in the aggregate. And as a realtor, people like, they go ugh, like, oh, HGTV. And you just saw my gut reaction when I heard flipper or a fixer upper. But it has absolutely instilled a huge interest in housing in the generations, in younger generations.
And has it helped with understanding that you don't have to buy the perfect house? It can be the perfect house.
Yeah, I think it's shown the art of possible.
Years?
The art of possible, for sure. The problem with a fixer-upper is that you need money.
Right. You need money or skills, or both.
Or both, and you need to be able to logistically deal with that. Right. It's like, it's all great on TV. It's like they go doo-doo, and it's like all of a sudden it's changed.
I always use
before and after.
I always use the example of, because my wife was a big HGTV, Chip and Joanna, whatever. Oh, yeah. Right? Like, so when we bought our house, we wanted to redo the bathroom. And she's like, can we move the toilet from here to here? And it was literally like 4 feet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yes. I'm like, just be aware it's going to take 2 days. She's like, what do you mean 2 days? Yeah. I'm like, there's joists. This is the second floor. There's joists.
Yeah.
So chances are, if the toilet is here, the joists are probably running this way, which means we have to go through them, which is not a 5-minute process, right? Like it's not a, oh, look, now the toilet's been moved. No. So it was eye-opening to her that some of these things that on TV looked super easy really are far more complicated.
Yes.
Right? So you need to have an understanding of that, I think, when you are buying a fixer-upper, that things aren't quite as easy as they often seem on TV.
Well, yeah, right? And I would just say, let's say you want to move that toilet, or you want to remodel a kitchen, or you need to put recessed lighting throughout your house, or do something. You got to realize the contractor comes every morning at 7. You got to be dressed. Or if you don't care, that's fine. But you got to be dressed, especially for women. They want to be dressed. There's dust. Everywhere. There's noise.
Everywhere. All the time.
All the time. There's shit outside of your house. There's tarps, if it's a big project, you got a dumpster sitting out there. Yeah. And it's like, that's all, it's all great in the movies and TV shows with like painting and like, paint fights and like all that. But at the end of the day, man, I'm kind of jaded. I don't like doing the work. I used to do a ton of it, but I just put a 1,000 square foot addition on the back of my house. And I redid the entire inside of a house that I bought in 2019. So I'm a little jaded about all this, but I'm also very realistic with my buyers. I'm like, listen, if you don't have the money to do this, now fixing it up over time, like, hey, every 6 months we're going to pick off a deal or pick off a project.
Once a year.
Once a year we're going to pick off a project,
right? Yeah.
Or we wait 2 years and save up for a kitchen. That's different. But buying something that's like you go from the settlement table to like backing the dumpster into the driveway and like doing a true fixer-upper.
Which is what we did.
Which is what you did. Is totally different. There's a lot of uncertainty. You have to hire the right people. Yep. You have to make sure those people show up every day.
You should have seen the look on my wife's face when I told her it's not demo day, it's going to be demo month.
Demo month. That's right.
Right?
Yeah. And it's depending on the age of the house. If it's really old, there's lead to deal with. There's asbestos to deal with. So you really got to love it or really hire somebody who loves it because otherwise you're going to be there for a while dealing with it. Right. I generally do not tell my first-time home buyers unless they are a contractor or have cash to even consider them.
A fixer-upper.
Yeah. Right. I just think, yes, you can get it for less. But by the time you add all the logistical costs
you're back into...
You're back right where you are.
Correct.
So why don't you just buy the finished product?
Right.
And that's it.
Okay. So what are some other things that buyers tend to...
I think that there are... not to go back to the financial piece, but especially right now, I don't, the interest rates and the talk about the interest rates and what the Fed is doing and where interest rates are going and heading and all like that. The Fed rate is not the same as the mortgage rate.
Right.
Yes, they are correlated, but there is not this, lockstep. Like, hey, Jerome Powell pulled on a lever and now he's raising your interest rate. Like, that's not how it works. In fact, at the end of November of 2022, the mortgage market kind of called bullshit on the Fed and said, we're going to kind of go our own way. And actually, the rate went up fastest in U.S. history, and then went down fastest in U.S. history. And most people don't know that. Most people think that they're at like 8%. Because they keep hearing,
it's raised
Powell just keeps raising it, and it was like 7% in November. And he keeps raising it, so it must be like 8, 9. I don't know what it is.
So people don't even look.
They don't even look. They just read the headline, and they're like, well, it was this then, and now he keeps raising it, so it must be higher, right? And like that's not how it works. Right. Granted, they're higher than they were a year ago. Certainly higher than they were 2 years ago. Anyone over the age of 50 will be like, in my day, I bought a house when it was, 18%, which nobody under the age of 50 wants to hear that shit. They don't want to hear it. Nope. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to hear how they walked to school uphill in 12 feet of snow both ways. That's because that's what that cab is. So that's a big one. I think overall, kind of going back to just the home ownership, there's a lot of demand for home ownership. I mean, they did a poll, a study that said that millennials believe in home ownership more than boomers. This generation of boomers that came out of World War II, and it was like the American dream, and I mean, it was really the greatest generation.
But if you're on social media at all, there's this thing going around that generation just wants to rent. They want to have freedom.
And every single one of those articles were written by Gen Xers or boomers. I know exactly the article you're talking about.
No dragging Gen X into this.
No, I'm Gen X. I'm Gen X. No, but
come on, blame the boomers.
I almost forgot about Gen X. I almost forgot about Gen X.
Like everyone.
Like everybody. No, but the articles being written in like your Philadelphia magazines in the 2000s was like all they want to do is they want to stay in the cities. They want to drink their cappuccino. They don't want to have kids.
They want this work, life, and play.
Just go travel and like be their own selves. Meanwhile, they're having kids. They need space. They don't want to raise their kids in the city. And that great emigration out of the cities that's been happening since 1950 after post World War II, when they started building houses a lot in the suburbs,
has been increasing.
It just keeps going. I mean, there's so many people, and especially with COVID, it has created even more of an exodus.
Right now that people don't necessarily need to go into an office anymore, you're like, why am I here?
That's right.
Right, with my kids.
That's right, and they need more space.
They could have a yard.
They could have a yard. And that's putting a lot of different pressures on suburban real estate because meanwhile, demand has apparently been softened, but there's so many people moving out of cities, moving around, trying to upsize into other things because they need more space. Houses serve a different purpose now after the pandemic for some people.
So let's kind of wrap this up. If you are looking at buying a home, you are going to be probably a first-time home buyer because someone that's been through this before kind of understands it. So as a first-time home buyer, what's my first 3 steps?
Your first 3 steps are to call a realtor and get a pre-approval and also really think about what you want to buy.
Don't start browsing Zillow yet to figure I want this one.
You can.
Or you use it to get ideas. Just
use it to get ideas, but my team, we use like a questionnaire. It's awesome. It's a 4-page questionnaire and asks all the right questions. It says, how big of a house do you want? Where do you want to live? What are the things you must have? What are the things you want to have? What are the things that you don't care about? And I encourage the couple to do this all together, but you got to call me first to get the questionnaire, and then we work all together. But those are really the 3 things, is like getting a baseline of like the process from me, talking to a lender, and then really dialing in what you're looking for. With those 3 things, you're ready to shop.
Okay.
All right.
Well, very cool.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Gummy.
And we'll be back with another episode.